Hi guys, Mary Beth Temple here. I want to show you this beautiful vintage style table runner. It has a modern look with its colors and materials furnished by our friends at Mona Luna Fabrics, but it has a vintage style with its shape and trimmings. I hope you have a good time making this. Let's get started. Let's talk about the materials that we're going to need. I used 3 coordinating fabrics, a large print, a solid, and a small print. And I used my large print as the focal point, so that's in the center. And you need a 13-inch square of this fabric. Now, if you have something with a strong orientation, horizontal, vertical, diagonal, make sure you account for that where you decide where in the fabric you're going to cut. And also, if you have one big sort of floral element or design element that you really like, try and make sure that you get that in the middle. But this looks good either way, so I just cut a 13-inch square. Next to that, I have my solid. I cut a piece that was 13 inches by 5 inches. I need 2 of those. And then for the end pieces, I cut 2 pieces that are 13 inches by 9 inches, and we're going to cut the angle on that in a minute. I also want to mention that you need trimming, a little less than 5 yards. I like trimming with a lot of body to it like this. See, this is very stiff. It's like a gimp cord almost is what they call it, but it's very sturdy trim, and I like that it has the scallops on it because it makes a nice edging. You can use whatever kind of trim you want, but you are going to need a fair amount of it, and I would recommend that you not get something that frays very easily. We're going to have a lot of cut ends when we get started, and I'll show you why in a minute. And then the last thing that you're going to need is a piece of fabric for the backing. I just used a plain off-white muslin. You're going to need it to be about 13 inches wide by 37 inches long, and I'll show you how to get the angle on that too. So let's cut the angle on our edge pieces. So I have the 2 pieces that are going to be on the edges. I'm going to hold them so that the right sides of the fabric are facing each other and the wrong side is up. I'm going to get my ruler. So the ruler goes along the 13-inch side. I'm going to make a mark on both sides that is 2 inches down. And then down here, I'm going to mark the center first. It'll be easier to see on this side. So there's my 13 inches. So I'm going to mark 6.5 just for my own sanity. And then I'm going to mark a 1/2 inch on either side. You don't have to put that center mark if you want, but I do it because what I do not want to have to do is make the cut more than one time. So now, using my rotary cutter, or if you don't want to use a rotary cutter, I'm not a big fan of them, to be honest. I know a lot of people swear by them, but I'm old school. I like to use a pencil and scissors. But line your ruler up from the mark at the top that was 2 inches down and the mark outside the center, the mark that is 1/2 inch outside of the center. So if you're going to use a pencil and scissors, go ahead, draw the pencil line and cut. Or if you want to use the rotary cutter, cut there. We can get rid of that, and then I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. I'm going to take the ruler from the 2-inch mark that's 2 inches down and line it up with the mark that is a 1/2 inch off center. And once again, you can draw a pencil line, or you can use the rotary cutter. And I know I'm not supposed to use the rotary cutter with it facing towards me, but I also can't get up and rearrange it at this point. So do as I say, not as I do. All right. So those are my angles, and because I made it so that the fabric was facing each other, they'll be good on both sides. The next thing I'm going to do is sew all of these pieces together. I'm going to sew the decorative one in the center, the 2 solid ones on either side of that, and then the angled ones on either side of that with a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and then I'll be right back. All right, now that I have all my seams sewn, I'm going to flip it over and I'm going to press my seam allowances open. The reason I'm going to do that is because I'm going to put trim on top of each one of these seams, and I don't want the seam allowance to be too bulky. After I have that done, I'm going to line up this piece, assembled piece, with the piece of backing fabric that I cut to 13 inches by 37 inches, and I am going to transfer the angle from the print fabric to the backing fabric. So using the print fabric as a template, cut the backing fabric in the same angle. The next thing I'm going to do is put the crossways pieces on the top of the fabric. I'm going to top stitch those right on. The reason I'm doing that first is I want the raw edges on either side to be encased in the backing fabric when I get that finished. Now, you could pin, you could glue, you could tape, you could whatever, but this is a stiff piece of trim and I don't feel like it's going anywhere. So make sure you have it right side up, because I've done that wrong before. And all I'm going to do is run one line of top stitching down the fabric to keep it in place. I'm going to do that 4 times, 1 time each on all 4 seams. Okay, I have my backing fabric pinned to my assembled, trimmed table runner top. I have the right sides facing. I'm going to sew all the way around, leaving a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and I'm going to leave a pretty sizable opening in the center of the biggest piece so I can turn the whole thing inside out. Before I turn it inside out, I want to make sure that I clip the seam allowances pretty close. I want to also make sure to cut on the diagonal across every one of those points so that they turn neatly, and then I'll turn it right side out. I will use the tip of my scissors to point those corners out to make sure they lay flat. I will press the seam allowance in on the opening. I will press the whole thing, and then all we have to do after that is put on the last piece of trim. So I'll get going on that, and I'll meet you on the flip side. So all I'm doing right now is top stitching my trim around the outer edge of the assembled table runner. And I want to make sure when I get to where the opening was that all that's folded under, and I'll close that opening when I get there. The thing that I wanted to show you on camera is how to address these corners. What I do not want, sometimes when you're quilt binding you can flip stuff over. I don't want to do that. I want to make sure that the right side of the trim is always facing up. So when I get to the corner, and I'm just going to do it by eye, there's not a big mathematical formula. I'm going to use my thumb. I'm going to pinch up some of the trim, and then I'm going to take the rest of the trim and put it where I want it to be going. And you can see I am sewing this so that part of the scallops are on the fabric and the rest of them are sort of hanging out in the air. And then I'm going to just take this little fold and pull it out so that I can turn the corner neatly. I'm not going to try and tug it and turn it because it is a point corner, not a rounded corner. And I'm going to finish it with the needle down, and I'm going to show you that one more time when I get to the bottom point, because the bottom point is even just a little bit more fiddly. And once again, you can see I haven't pinned the trim in place. I haven't done anything like that. The reason is the trim is really, really thick, and by the time I get a pin through it, I feel like it's just going to go off square and be every which way. If you're using a lighter trim, go ahead and pin or tape or whatever, use wonder clips, you know, whatever you normally use to hold your trimming in place. But as thick as this trim is, I think putting a needle through it would be a poor choice. Putting a pin through it would be a poor choice. So now here I am, I'm coming up on the point again. I'm going to stop maybe a 1/2 inch back. I'm going to take my thumb and pull the trim up and put the working trim in the other direction because that's where it has to go. And I pilled up a little too much. So it really is an art, not a science. It's to do it, you're doing it by eye. I like to try and pull out a couple of those little scallops so they're right there on the tippy point. And so I can see this is where it's going to go. This is where I'm going to go. So I can see that's laying nice and flat. I have my fold right here. So I'm going to just continue around. Stop with the needle down. And I'm going to have to tug that up a little bit because it came off. But once again, make sure that it's lined up. I'm lining up the edge of my table runner with the center of the trim. Make sure you don't run over your finger. There we go. All right, so I'm going to continue on all the way around. And you can see right here, there is the corner of the trim. So I have to worry about that on the 2 points and the 2 sort of corners on either side on the print with the small floral. Now, it doesn't really matter where you begin and end your trimming. I actually, when I did the model, I began it at the point and then covered the raw edge with the fold. But again, because this trimming is so thick, you just pick your placement carefully and make sure that you can fold under the top raw edge. And remember that the opening that you used when you had to turn the piece right side out will be closed up when you put the trimming on. I hope you had a great time making this vintage-inspired table runner. I love the look of it, sort of retro and modern all at the same time. Anyway, this is Mary Beth Temple signing off. Thank you so much for joining us.